Hello bookworms! Today I'm going to be sharing my July wrap-up with you. So in June, when I did my wrap-up, which came out a little bit late, I said that I would definitely be reading more than 7 books in July, and I am pleased to say that I did do that. Not only did I read more than 7 books, I read 8.5 books, and in that stack, I read A Court of Silver Flames, and I also read about half of The Shadow Rising by Robert Jordan, which should really count for reading like an additional 3 or 4 books because both of those are so long. So really funny, A Court of Silver Flames is the book that put me into a reading slump back in February, early March. It's also the book that pulled me out of my reading slump in July, and it also got me going on this big fantasy kick, so I'm really excited that I was finally able to continue reading it and detach from like the bad memories that I had. I ended up really enjoying it, but I'll talk more about that. But it just goes to show you that like timing can really make a huge difference when you're reading a book, and it can completely affect your reading experience and your enjoyment level. And yeah, gonna get into the reviews. So first I read Survive the Night by Riley Sager. I have been really highly anticipating this book. I've now read all of Riley Sager's books, and I unfortunately have to wait until he puts out a new one. I always tend to enjoy all of them, and this one was kind of an exception though. So I really liked the setting, and I really liked the like atmosphere and the vibe of the book, but I didn't love the story. So this book follows a girl who is leaving her college. She meets somebody on a college message board and agrees to go on a road trip with him back to her home because her best friend has just been murdered at her college. There is a serial killer going around known as the campus killer, and she's just like trying to cope with that, and she doesn't feel like she can handle college at the moment, so she decides to head home. She also has this interesting thing where she's a film student, and sometimes she just like sees things in her mind as movies, so she can like tune out for a minute. Like she'll just like check out of a conversation because she's seeing like a film play out of the scene that she's in her mind. So sometimes you like don't really know if something's really happening or if it's just something that's happening in her head. But the two of them are stuck in this car together, and as she is talking to this guy and learning more about him, there are pieces of his story that are just like not adding up. So she starts to become suspicious that perhaps he is maybe the campus killer. Things go from there. So one of my complaints about the book is that I kind of was able to call what was happening pretty early on, if not by like page 20, then it was definitely by like page 50. So I really loved the concept of the book. I thought that this was going to be like, it had the potential to be one of my favorites, but it ended up being my least favorite of his books so far. One of the things that I did really like about it is that it takes place in the 90s, so obviously there are no like cell phones. This girl is very dependent on the people that she runs into, and I really liked the atmosphere of the book. I really liked how much they talked about film. So there were a lot of elements of it that I did enjoy, but overall it just like didn't work for me. I also felt like there was one kind of big plot hole in the book, and I can't talk about it because it would be a spoiler, but yeah, it just overall was not my favorite, though there were things that I did really like about it. And I wasn't like, oh my god, I hate this book while I was reading it. I was like, this is disappointing, but fine. So I gave this one 3 stars. Then I read Beautiful Chaos by Cami Garcia and Margaret Stoll, and I listened to this one on audiobook, and I really enjoyed it. I think that this is actually my favorite installment in the series so far. I'm actually listening to the 4th and final book right now, and I'm really excited that I'm going to be able to finish up this series that I started last year. For those who don't know, the Castor Chronicles series follows Ethan Waite and Lena Duquesne. It takes place in the South, somewhere like far outside of Charleston, so I think it's in South Carolina. Lena comes from like a family of castors, and one of the things that I find to be really unique about this series is like, because this is like an old YA fantasy series, it's actually told from Ethan's perspective, and usually we get the perspective of the girl, so it was just something that was kind of like refreshing. I've really enjoyed the lore of the story. There are definitely a couple of things that like don't hold up, but it hasn't detracted from my enjoyment of the series. Like as a whole, I find them to be really like comforting and just like nice to listen to. The audiobook narrator though is like the worst at female voices, but also like really funny when he's doing the voice of one of the ants or something. Like his voice gets really high and it's just entertaining. But I think I said it already, but this one so far has been my favorite installment in the series, and I gave this one 4 stars. Then I read A Court of Silver Flames by Sarah J Maas. I'm just gonna hold this like this because I got rid of the dust jacket so that I could just enjoy the pretty color and have it, you know, sit over there once I'm done wrapping it up. This is the 4th book in the ACOTAR series, and we are shifting perspectives because the first trilogy focuses all on Feyre, and now we have shifted to Nesta, who is one of Feyre's sisters. Nesta is definitely a prickly heroine. It took me quite a while to warm up to her, honestly. I did not love her like when I started reading this book, but my feelings completely changed by the end of it, which like you can count on Sarah J Maas to do that with lots of characters. So overall I ended up really loving this one. It continued the story. We also obviously get character cameos from all of the people from the main series, which was delightful. Though I didn't super love one of the storylines regarding a pair of characters, though I did like the way that it resolved. Oh, I loved the Valkyrie element. I really loved seeing Nesta make female friends, and obviously I love Cassian. He, like, throughout the whole series, I would always be like, Cassian deserves better than Nesta because I just like didn't like Nesta, but now I like super love them together. So this ended up being delightful. I'm really glad that I got sucked back into it, and that, like I said, it pulled me out of my reading slump and made me cry. It was so good. I loved it. I gave this one 5 stars. Then I read The Nature of Witches by Rachel Griffin, and this was like an unexpected new favorite for me. Like it's gonna, I don't know if it's a favorite of all time, but it definitely has the potential to be a favorite of this year. We are following a character named Clara who goes to this like magic school, and she is a really powerful witch. So the way that the magic works in this world is that there are witches based on each season, and depending on which season of a witch you are, that's when your powers are like the most amplified. But Clara is like a once in a generation kind of witch, and she's called an ever witch, so her power is strong during every single season, and she's able to work with other witches to like amplify their power. However, Clara has found that anytime that she uses her power, somebody close to her ends up getting hurt or ends up dying. So she's been really like holding back and not living up to her full potential because she doesn't want anyone that she cares about to get hurt. And she also pushes people away. She tries not to forge any kind of connections because she just really doesn't feel comfortable putting other people in danger after the people that she has lost so far. At the start of the book, she's still like dealing with the death of her best friend, and there are new people that end up coming to her school that try to like take over her training because they are really dependent upon her. There are a lot of natural disasters happening. That's another thing too, like the magic is all very tied to nature and natural disasters and things that are happening that are being caused by humans, and I really loved it. Like this book was basically just a love letter to nature. There were a couple of elements of it that did feel very YA. If this was an adult book, it definitely would have been like an all-time new favorite. I still like loved it. I really think it was all of like the descriptions of nature and all of the nature magic. And also I really did like Clara a lot as a character. I think that she was pretty mature for her age and for what she was dealing with, even though there were some elements that did read a little bit younger. Overall, like so good, so atmospheric. If you're like looking for a good fall book, I would definitely check this one out, though it does like cover every season, so you really can't go wrong with what time of year you read it during, but which is, you know, people usually tend to read those books in the fall, and I really do think that this is like the perfect one. So if you are looking for something fun and magical, and if you also really love nature, I could not recommend this book more. I gave this one 4.5 stars. Then I just finished reading Kingdom of the Wicked yesterday, and oh my goodness, I loved this book so much. This is another one that deals with witches. The second book is coming out really soon, and I'm so glad that I waited so long to read this first one because like I need book 2. Like, this was so good. We have two twin sisters, Amelia and Victoria, and they are both witches, and they have been told all of these legends by their grandmother for their entire lives, but they don't really like believe that they're true. And then Victoria ends up getting murdered, and Amelia is like hell-bent on getting revenge for her twin. It's an Italian-inspired fantasy, and I just loved it. It was written so beautifully. The story was so engaging. Oh my gosh, we get to meet like so many princes from hell. I love it. I love Wrath. This whole book was just like so good. Oh, also Amelia's family owns a restaurant called Sea and Vine, so there's a lot of discussion of different foods, and it made me extremely hungry while I was reading. I just like devoured this book. Like I read it in 3 days, I think, like 2 to 3 days. I didn't really read that much on the first day, and incredible. Could not put it down. Cannot wait for the next one. So glad that I finally read this, and I'm not surprised that I loved it as much as I did because I love Carrie's other series too, so I should have known that this would also be a new favorite. And this one I also gave 4.5 stars. Then I read Sunny Song Will Never Be Famous by Suzanne Park, and this one I kind of struggled with a little bit. I had really high hopes for it because we're following an influencer who gets sent to a digital detox camp. I am all for like disconnecting from online and finding value in real life versus things online, but I think what I didn't love about this one is that it read like really young. It was definitely on the very low end of young adult, and I was expecting something a little bit more mature. It was a very quick read. I do like Sunny as a character. It just wasn't what I was like looking for. I don't really feel like I got as much out of it as I thought that I was going to. It was kind of like a very basic story about not getting distracted by the internet and doing things in your real life, but there wasn't anything that I felt like was like a revelation or anything. It was just like, okay, yes. And also things happened really quickly. Like I felt like she got to the camp and was like mad about having to go to this camp, but she kind of like changed her tune really quickly. So it was fine. Like I didn't dislike it, but I wouldn't highly recommend it. If you're looking for a book about like disconnecting from the internet, I think I would still go with some of the nonfiction reads that I've liked a bit more. And I gave this one 3 stars. Then I made progress on The Shadow Rising by Robert Jordan. This is the 4th book in the Wheel of Time series. I haven't finished it, so I can't give you a full wrap up just yet, but I'm really loving it so far. Things have gotten really interesting, and the series is just fantastic. I'm halfway into it, so I have another half that I will be reading in August, but I thought it was worth noting because it takes me a really long time to read these, and I did invest a lot of time in that first half. Then I listened to 2 nonfiction books. So the first one is One Day You'll Thank Me, essays on dating, motherhood, and everything in between by Cameron Eubanks. I might have gotten like the second portion of that title a little bit wrong, but Cameron was one of the main characters on Bravo reality show Southern Charm, which I really loved. I binged that entire series last year, and I just got like addicted to it, even though I know that it's not like a good show. I just couldn't stop watching it. But Cameron was a character that I did genuinely like. So when she came out with the book, I was very curious about it. I thought that there was going to be kind of like juicy tidbits about Southern Charm and like the filming and maybe some stuff about her castmates, but I should have known that Cameron is more of a classy person and wouldn't get into that kind of stuff. So I did feel like the title was like a little bit misleading because this book was like 90% about motherhood, which is not something that I can relate to. It was kind of interesting to hear her experience, but I don't know, it wasn't what I was looking for, so I didn't really like love it. I did listen to the whole thing in one day. Cameron did narrate it herself, which was nice to hear like that familiar voice, but I would not recommend this one, and I gave it like 2.5 stars. Then I read Year of Yes by Shonda Rhimes. Alexa actually recommended this book to me, or I saw that she had read it and asked her if I would like it, and she said yes. And I did like this. I thought this is another one where like I thought that it was fine, but I didn't like super love it. And this one was also narrated by Shonda Rhimes, so it was nice to hear her voice narrating it. She does talk a lot about Grey's Anatomy, which is a show that I never watched, admittedly. I watched like the first episode, but I'm just not good with watching like medical shows. Like I just stay away from anything that takes place in a hospital because it's just like I don't know, I just like can't handle it. So yeah, never got into Grey's Anatomy, but she does talk a lot about Grey's Anatomy in the book. And this was all about her having a year of yes and saying yes to things that she would normally say no to. So I did like that element of it. I thought it was interesting, the kinds of situations that she got herself into by saying yes, and the different things that she learned about her life and about what she likes and what she doesn't like. It was pleasant. It was a pretty solid read, but it's not a new favorite. And I gave this one 3 stars. So those are all of the books that I read in July. Let me know if you read anything that I mentioned. If I could recommend like 2 books to you from that stack, I would definitely recommend Nature of Witches and Kingdom of the Wicked, which are both like just perfect for getting into the Halloween spirit. So yeah, that's all that I have for this video, and I will see you guys soon in a new one. Bye!